similar to any other personality test that's out there, similar to Myers-Briggs, type indicator, etc. These are out there so that you can understand the commonalities within groups of people. And there are certain commonalities that we all have. There are those of us who are more compassionate than others, those of us who are more visionaries, those of us who are more enthusiastic, those of us who are more organized, etc. And True Colors is a really easy way to identify which of those types of personalities you fall into. And it's an easy way for us as educators and as parents to understand our own children. Because when you know where their mindset is and their personality type, you can think about parenting and working with them as children in that sense. Each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses, as do we, and we come at it from that personality, from our mindset. So when you guys are done, we're going to look at all four and talk about the pros and cons of all four personality types. Y'all didn't know I was going to put you to work. I'm going to give you one more minute. So it looks like the majority of you are done, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. The first thing you need to understand about this personality test, like any other personality test, there isn't a good or a bad. These are just ways to understand human nature. The other thing that you have to understand is that not everyone is just that color all the time. So when you did your scores, probably you have one that stands out as this is who I am, and probably a secondary color that is in there. And then the other two are ones that can be learned. And there are times when you can act that way. Out of curiosity, how many people got blue? Green? It's very rare. Orange? And gold. Here we go. If you turn to the other side, I put in a little description, and Denise, if you can go to the next slide. The personality types are pretty well set. Blues are compassionate. Those are the people who have empathy. I joke I have very little blue in me. I'm a very green person, and I've had to learn how to be more empathetic and how to be blue. Blue people wear their hearts on their sleeve. They tend to rule by emotions. They care what you actually think. So if you have a blue child, they are very sensitive. My son is blue, cries very easily. My husband is blue, very blue. Very difficult for me to learn how to be empathetic with them, but by knowing that, I can keep track of what am I going to say that's going to affect them. Those of you that are gold, you're a rule follower. You like things organized. Chances are your closet is perfectly organized, your house is perfectly organized, and if there's a paper out of place, you know it. Right? Okay, so gold people tend to like things to be perfectly by the book. You've got that kid who's the perfectionist and everything has to be just right and everything has to be on the right lines. They're gold. I'm not very gold. I can be. I've learned how to be. The military trained me how, but it's not my comfort zone. Orange is my secondary color, and it seems to be more common amongst children. It's the adventurous one. Oranges like to take risks and jump on things, and they're willing to jump up and try anything. Woo, it's a party, it's exciting, everything is fun. They don't think about the consequences usually. They are more about, this is new, this is exciting, I'm going to try it. And then there's greens. It's the smallest part of the population. Greens are visionaries. They tend to be thought of as intellectual snobs. They like to think very big. They have big ideas. They try to go above and beyond, and they usually need someone who's gold or blue to tether them down. Hence, I'm a green. I remember as a child telling everyone that, I was the smartest person I knew, and I really thought that. It wasn't until college that I realized I am not the smartest person in the world. But I truly went through most of my life thinking that, whether it was true or not. Very green of me. Green people also don't tend to put up with emotions ruling decisions. When I make decisions, I can separate myself out. That's really hard as a parent, because when parenting my kids, I have to remember what their personalities are, and I can't always compartmentalize and deal with it that way. So as a parent, I've had to learn blue strategies and orange strategies to work with kids. I strongly suggest, if this is something you're interested in, if you look up the True Colors personality on Google, you will come up with tons of information, how to parent a blue child, orange child, etc. You will find information on how to work with them and how to bring out your own other colors. Next slide. So the next thing I wanted to really go over with you that ties into this is growth mindset. Unfortunately, most of us grew up in a fixed mindset world. I remember coming home with a 97 on a test and my father throwing it back at me and asking me where the other 3% went. It was very much expected that I was going to get 100% on everything, because if I didn't, it meant that I was sloppy. Now, if I failed something, I found out later, that would have been okay, but I didn't know that as a child. My father explained to me later as an adult that had I failed something, it meant that I actually didn't know it. But getting a 97% just meant I was sloppy. That's a very fixed mindset. And it causes issues in kids because they start to think that they're just not good enough. Carol Dweck, who is the guru of mindset education, she has written several books, she has talks on understanding growth mindset. I did a parent university on it last year as well, and it's a different way of looking at things. So when we were talking earlier about if my child comes home with a bad grade, do I get upset? No. I actually ask him, was this your best work? It's a different conversation. By asking them if this is their best work, the conversation is about their quality of effort, not about the grade. So I urge you to look at these fixed mindset and growth mindset. How many of you are very straight about this is your expectations, if you don't do well, these are the consequences, and I'm going to follow them to a T and not look at extenuating circumstances? Majority of people are. Majority of people will say, well, the child broke the rules, here's the consequence, and that's what's going to happen. Unfortunately, kids are humans like we are, and there's always other situations to look at. And too often, we are quick to judge and make decisions based on what our expectations are, not looking at what their expectations are. So moving from a growth mindset to a fixed mindset takes time, and it takes practice. I put some one-liners up here for you to help. Well done, you're learning too. So, child brings home a multiplication test. Most of it's wrong. Instead of, you failed, the answer is, did you try your best? They say yes. Good job, you're learning your multiplication tables. You're learning to. This is a process. If we expect perfection at the get-go, we're expecting robots, we're not expecting human beings. Things like, I noticed that you've really worked hard on this and you've excelled in this area. That's fixed mindset. That's what we think is giving good praise. We think, oh, we're recognizing that the artwork was good. Well, that's still a fixed mindset. It's a child hears, oh, I'm good at art, but I'm not good at writing, or I'm not good at X, Y, and Z. Instead, we could say things like, I'm proud of the effort you've put into this entire project. I love the effort that you've put into the entire project. Without singling out the special parts. Then at a different time, you can bring up, hey, the artwork you did on that project was really great. Do you like doing art? Could we expand on it? Can we build on it? So the praise comes later for the part that stood out, as opposed to looking at what they're giving you that day and praising a specific part. Because when you do that, you're actually diminishing all the rest of it. And that's hard to think that way. We've been so used to giving fixed mindset praise. Things like when they mess up. Well, you're only going to learn from this mistake. Yeah, they've heard that a million times. But if we truly believe that, and if we truly believe that mistakes are an opportunity for growth, and we actually embrace that, and our kids learn that from us, they're going to know that they can make mistakes and grow. Every time I make a mistake, I tell my kids. I do. Today, I got in an argument with my son right before I left. I needed a charge cord for my laptop, and mine was at Van Owen, and my son has the same laptop, and I asked him for his, and he's been home sick. And he said, well, my computer only has 20%, and I want to play Sims while you're gone. And I got upset, and I left angry. I literally went 2 blocks, and then I called him. And I apologized. I said, you know what? I was wrong. He goes, well, I meant to give you the, I'm like, no, I was wrong. This was my mistake. I left my cord at work. I was asking you to help solve the problem, but I wasn't thinking about what your needs are. And I apologized. Most parents don't take the time to do that with their kids. By owning up that I make mistakes too, and I can learn from my mistakes, and I can better myself, it makes it easier so when he makes mistakes, he can tell me, I made a mistake, and he can own up to it. It allows that communication to be completely fluid, and for us to constantly talk about, we're all in a process. None of us are perfect. None of us have achieved perfection. All of us are practicing. All of us are aiming towards the goal. But it is a practice and it's a process, and we have to make sure our kids know that too. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of things to understand really about fixed mindset and growth mindset. The biggest one is the understanding of intellect. Too often, we focus on IQ scores as being the only sign of intellect. And a fixed mindset says that an intellect is something you're born with, and it's not something that can be learned, and it's your IQ, and that's it. So you either have the brains or you don't. A growth mindset functions on the idea that intellect can be expanded, that there's the possibility of learning and growing. And I know that most people will say, well, of course, I believe my kid can learn. But can you truly believe that their intellect can be expanded upon? That is a different conversation. People who have a fixed mindset also avoid challenges. I'm already good at this, so this is what I'm going to work on. How many of you have a child who's really good at one thing, and they think that's all they're good at? Most kids. Most kids think, I'm really good at math, or I'm really good at art, or I'm really good at sports. And whatever it is, they think that is their only strength. They have difficulty thinking that they could actually grow and become good at something else. And it starts at a really early age. My daughter in third grade would say, I'm not good at math, and I'm not good at reading. I'm really just not good at school. And it took having a growth mindset facilitator who actually encouraged her to become better at everything and have her change the way she looks at school. And it took that idea of, no, you can come above, you can learn, you can move beyond this. I was just sharing with Ms. Field today, my daughter came in third grade 2 years below grade level. She had been at Carpenter with me the entire time, and she was in a very fixed mindset environment. So when they gave her an IEP in second grade, that meant that she was in a pull-out program. And she learned very quickly that she was not going to learn with the other kids in her class, and that the way she was going to learn is going to be separate, taught by an aide only. And that happened every single day. Every single day for language, arts, and math, my daughter was put at a table with 2 other kids, with a care team member, an aide at the school, and that's who taught her primary lessons. And she had a very negative self-image. Because the fixed mindset says, if you're not doing well, then you can't be part of the whole, because that's where you belong. You belong in this other group. Come third grade, she had Ms. Field. She completely grew, blossomed, 4th grade, 5th grade. Next week, she's exiting out of her IEP. She's meeting grade level standards. And what it took was a different way of thinking. The idea that you can learn, and you can get beyond this, and you can grow, and you are capable of it. She told me today that she loves math. To hear that was ecstatic, made me so happy, because her self-image has grown so much because of the mindset, not because of anything else. It completely has to do with the idea that we supported her and the school has supported her to have that growth mindset. What ends up happening when we present our kids with a fixed mindset as a parent, if we continue to encourage only the things they're good at, they shut themselves off of the things that they're not good at, and they will never have the opportunity to learn that. It is how we pigeonhole our kids without realizing we do it. Because we want to praise them, we continue to praise only the things that they're successful in. And we do not praise them in things that they're not successful in but are trying at. And unfortunately, that results in kids thinking that I'm only good at X, Y, and Z. So why even bother trying everything else? I've never been praised for it. I've never gotten positive feedback for it. So why bother? We have kids who have fixed mindsets too. They're the kids who come to school and expect a gold star for everything they do. I tried, I did great. I'm the gold star child. And what ends up happening with them when they come into an environment like ours that's growth mindset, there are some kids who balk at it. They're like, well, I'm not getting accolades every single day. I must not be doing well. My name's not on the board with a million checks next to it that I've read all these books, because there are schools that do that. They do accelerated reader, and every kid competes for points, and it's public. And what if you're the kid who can't read very well? It's public shaming, and we don't realize that they do that. But the kid who's used to being at the top now has this expectation of themselves that they're always going to be at the top. And unfortunately, now we have to actually change the way we speak to them, and they're the ones who are going to have the hardest time going into a growth mindset, because their expectations on themselves are harder than anything we've ever put on them. The most important part of this is the very last part that's in bold. If we raise fixed mindset children, they're going to plateau. Let's be honest. Eventually they're going to hit that wall and they're all going to just level out. They're never going to hit their full potential because they're going to be happy with what they're good at being all that they're good at. They're never going to grow in any other area. That's scary. If we raise kids to be a growth mindset, they'll try anything. Even when they're not good at it, they're going to try, and they're not going to give up. Because they're of the mindset that if I continue, I'm going to make progress. And progress does not mean success. I think we need to understand that too. Progress means that you're moving forward on the continuum. We don't expect every single student to be valedictorian. We don't expect every single student to be perfect at everything and have every single grade in every single subject be in the top marks. That's not realistic. But what we can expect is every single child to do their personal best and to have good self-esteem and to be willing to take risks and to see themselves as successful for doing their best. And that's a completely different conversation. Next slide, please. You need it up here? All right. So moving on from growth mindset, that brings us into how we discipline. So, okay, I know my kids' personality. I know how they think. I know how I think, so I know how to change my ways with them to meet their personality and their needs. I'm going to change the way I speak to my child and have a growth mindset when speaking to them, and keep my critiques to being positive and about their growth and about their successes. But what happens when I get in that power struggle? This is the hardest one. And this is where I am still. I'm working on this. I can do this with all your kids. With my own, this is hard. I'm very honest about that. So rule number 1. These are the only 2 rules in Love and Logic. That's it, 2 rules. Rule number 1. Adults set firm limits in a loving way without anger, lecture, threats, or repeated warnings. It's the second half that we don't do. We all set limits. But when they hit that limit, it's where we react. Or when they're exceeding what our expectations are, that's when we start reacting. That's when we start going, well, I'm going to take away your phone, I'm going to take away this, and I'm going to take away that. And honestly, it ends up being a big power struggle, and the person punished the most is you. The second rule is when children misbehave and cause problems, adults hand these problems back in a loving way. Ooh, that's the hard one. We practice it at school with the staff, and my favorite one is when we were first learning about Love and Logic. It was the story about this boy who got in trouble with this teacher, and this teacher was the kind who would jump up and down and scream and yell and in the hallways make a big scene. And the principal had asked him instead to not react. So this child tells the teacher to fuck off. And the teacher's reaction was normally to scream, and this time said, "I'm sorry. You made a really bad choice. We'll talk about it later." And walked away. And the teacher, of course, didn't believe the principal that this would work. It was like, the kid just told me to F off and I did absolutely nothing. And the teacher was more angry because they weren't able to react to it. But how do you think it made that kid feel? Kid didn't get a rise out of the adult. Didn't get it escalated like it normally would have. And instead was told, we'll talk about it later. Like back in the 50s, it was wait till your father gets home. It's the same principle. When you tell a child, we'll talk about it later, they're going to stew. And they're going to think, and they're going to stew, and they're going to get upset, and they're going to get worked up. But it's not all about we'll talk about it later. It's when later comes, what do you do? So there are 2 parts to waiting till later. Number 1, they're getting more anxious and scared and concerned. Number 2, you have time to calm down so that when you're speaking to them again, you're not angry and worked up. Wait till later. If you take nothing else away tonight, but that phrase, we'll talk about it later, it's the best gift you can give yourselves and your kids. It's hard. I know. I definitely know. There are times when my kids push me to my limits and I scream and yell, and then I have to stop and think, oh my God, that's not what I want to do. And I go in and apologize and we talk about it. But then when I'm really conscious of what's going on, and I stop, and instead of it escalating, I walk away, or I take a mommy time out and say, you know what? I need some space. We'll talk about this later. And I walk away. That's the best thing you can do. Next slide. So, there are 8 essential skills in Love and Logic. There are 8 ways to actually handle discipline. And I'm going to go through all of these with some examples, if you guys are okay with it. This is my favorite part. So number 1 is neutralizing the argument. Neutralizing the argument is having a list of one-liners, things that you say every single time. And you could look them up, and I think I gave you guys a list of them as well. If not, I will send it out. These are one-liners that you use every time there's a problem. We'll talk about it later is one of them. I'm so sorry, you made a bad decision. And when they keep arguing, you just repeat yourself like a broken record. I'm so sorry. Ooh, can't believe you just did that. That's it. I was hoping we wouldn't have this conversation, but I guess we will later. Little things like that really give you that power. They're going to still fight it. But instead of yelling and instead of arguing and instead of falling into that trap of that power struggle that we all have done, I know we've all done that. We'll do questions after. It's more about that one-liner that you repeat, whatever it is that's your go-to. In my house, it's, I'm so sorry you made that decision. That's it. I'm so sorry you made that decision. Because they did make a decision. Whatever their action is, it was their decision to do it. So I always hand it back to them. I'm so sorry. Not I'm disappointed, because then it's a fixed mindset, but I'm sorry. It's a big difference there. The second part is the delayed consequence. As you guys know, as a school, when any child has an infraction, our first reaction isn't a consequence. It's a behavior journal. First of all, it gives them time to write out what they have to say and think about it. Second, it gives us time to calm down so we can deal with it. But the best part is it's delayed the consequence. I'm not going to talk to you right now when you're angry. We'll talk about it later. I'm not going to talk about this when I'm angry. We'll talk about it later. That pause and that time away gives you that chance to regroup, to make sure you're in the right mindset and that you're not going to argue back and that you're maintaining the power. You are in complete control as a parent if you delay it and you wait and speak in a calm voice. Now, empathy is the other part of this. So too often with kids, they make a mistake and we are quick to judge and give consequences and not even think about why they made the mistake. So if you're not going to have your child write about it at home, you open with, now that it's delayed, half an hour later or 10 minutes later, whenever you're calm, or 3 hours for some, and a glass of wine later. Then you're going to start with, so do you want to tell me why you made this decision? Let them explain it. Let them try to explain it. Chances are they're going to blame themselves and be harder on themselves than you ever would have been. But at the same time, they're doing it later so they actually have some sight into it and can think about what they're going to say. My son slammed the door a couple years back, and my husband and I's reaction was, we're going to take the door off the hinges. That was it. He kept slamming, and he did it multiple times, and it was, we're going to take the door off the hinges. And instead, and you know Adam, you know exactly what I'm talking about, yeah. So instead it was, okay, why is he doing this? So the conversation I had with him was, why did you slam the door? I was angry. Can we come up with other ways to handle your anger? Then the real truth came out in conversation. He wasn't slamming the door just because he was angry and he could have hit a pillow or done something else. It was more, he was slamming the door because that closed me off. He needed space away from me. And instead of me running after him, yelling at him, by slamming the door, he was closing off his door. So then we talked about rules. We talked about, okay, when do you get to have your door closed? What does it mean to have your door closed? What are the rules that we're going to establish as a household when he closes his door? Now I knock. And I still walk right in, but I knock first, so he knows. He hasn't slammed the door since. My daughter started now, so we're going back down that route. But my son has not. And it didn't take me taking the door off the hinges and my husband yelling and me yelling. All that would have done was continued the argument. All that would have done was escalated. And we've had those We've had plenty of those where he's gotten upset, I've gotten upset, we've given 1,000,001 consequences, and it ends up that he's lost everything, and we're sitting there going, okay, now what do we do with him? Because in the end, now he's more angry. He said, I hate you, you're the worst mother, I'm feeling horrible, I'm feeling deflated, I'm upset, I'm angry, and it's now affecting the way I'm talking to my daughter and my husband, and in the end, it solved absolutely nothing. But by delaying it, by having that conversation, and then by having the empathy of asking him why, and listening, really listening to the why, we've changed the conversation again. There is a song called the Uh-Oh Song, and most of your kids are too old for it, but if you have littles at home and you look it up, it's basically the idea is when they make a mistake, instead of, I can't believe you did that and being upset, you sing. You made a mistake today. Uh-oh, I can't believe you made a mistake today. I guess we'll have to talk about it later. And that sing-songy voice is gonna keep you calm, and it's gonna drive them crazy. But you haven't yelled, and you haven't gotten upset, and they're the ones who are getting upset, and they're the ones who are getting worked up because they made a mistake, and you're still maintaining control and power. Let's keep that in mind. Obviously, positive relationships are a big part of it, is having that conversation and knowing that you can be trusted with that. We do that with our kids. We had an incident just yesterday at school where a child came running into the office. This other kid hit me with a rock. At most schools, the principal would have run out, grabbed the kid who threw the rock, pulled them in the office, yelled at them, given them a consequence, called the parents, probably suspended them, and that would have been the end of it, right? I walked out and I asked the boy who threw the rock to come in the office. And he came in very scared. I handed him a behavior journal. I said, fill this out, and I walked out. I didn't stay in there, because I would intimidate him. I walked out of the room, gave him about 5 minutes, walked in and checked, he was still writing, gave him another 5 minutes, and I came in and I read what he wrote. He and his friend were playing a game where they were tossing a rock back and forth. Another boy came running through their game and accidentally got hit. This child felt so horrible that the paper that he handed me was completely covered with tears. And so we had a conversation about it. I said, okay, it was an accident. Yeah. I said, did you mean to hit him with a rock? No. I said, are rocks the best thing to be tossing around at school? I guess not. I said, what could you have done? He goes, well, I guess I could have gotten a ball. I said, yeah, like the one that's 5 feet away from you. And he's like, I guess you're right. I said, next time, are you going to get a ball instead? Yes. I said, okay. That was it. I was calm. He calmed down. He definitely understood what he had done wrong. He went up on his own and apologized to the other child. They shook hands, and then they went and got a ball and started playing. There was absolutely no need for this child to get severe consequences. It was an accident. We all make mistakes. I know I have, by mistake, elbowed my own child in the face, opening a refrigerator. It happens. But if we want everyone to have empathy for us and understand that we make mistakes, we need to have the same thing for our children. And having that positive relationship now means that this kid knows he can trust me. He knows that should he do something wrong, he can come and have that conversation with me. And I'm not going to yell, and I'm not going to scream. But if I give consequences, there's a reason for it. They're not just given blindly. A hard one. Setting limits with enforceable statements. Okay. The hardest part of consequences that we give our kids is actually making them enforceable. If you mess up, I'm not going to let you do anything this weekend. Well, who does that punish? Now I'm the one stuck at home dealing with it and constantly having to monitor that they're not doing anything. That's not punishing them. It's just going to annoy me all weekend. Let's think about enforceable consequences. If you misbehave, this is the consequence. I'm going to take away your phone for X amount of hours, or X amount of days, or whatever it is. But it's specific. It's not, I'm just going to take it away. because that's not enforceable, and we're going to wishy-washy on that. And especially with devices, I have to say, taking away devices, although we think that pains them the most, is not always the best consequence. How many of your children have more than one device? A phone, an iPad, a laptop. They have the computer at home. They have the TV. You can't take it all away. That's crazy. But real consequences that we can do. Enforceable consequences. That's the hard one. Making sure that our limits are realistic. Asking a child to, giving consequences, we talked about with grades, that's not realistic. That's basically saying, unless you're perfect, I'm going to give you a consequence. How about if you've tried your hardest? Now, if you don't try, there's a different conversation. But as long as you're trying and you're doing your best, that's what I'm going to expect. Looking at setting real limits to what they do. My kids have devices, but I've set limits on them from the get-go. Every single device in our house has parental controls. I can turn them off and on from my phone. I can see what apps they're using. I can limit what apps they have access to at any given time. That's enforceable. I can say, you know what, tonight, you're not playing this game. And I always know which game is their favorite at the time, because I could see how often they used it. See? I'm not able to monitor that. Or giving consequences of, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to go on that field trip. We know a parent who did that. That's the hardest one, because you already paid for that field trip. But sometimes you have to be able to enforce that and say, this is the result of what you've done. We have a 7th grader who got caught in a lie, had snuck out with another friend, and they were at the other friend's house, and they were supposed to be there. Well, apparently these two 7th graders decided to walk to the mall without telling their parents, without any parental consent. They walked to the mall, spent a couple hours at the mall, and came home. The parent of the child who was at this friend's house found out, and as a result, took away the overnight field study. That's hard. But they enforced it. It's specific. It's one consequence. It's not, I'm going to take away anything and everything. It wasn't you're grounded. It was very specific. That field study that's next week, that's an overnight, 2-night trip, you're not going. And in fact, since I've already paid for it, you're going to do chores to pay back the money. Specific, enforceable. She knew the limits. Much easier than blowing up, screaming, yelling, taking away everything, because that's kind of our go-to. The other part of this is sharing that control. Let your child come up with their own consequences sometimes. You would be surprised at how much harder they're going to be on themselves. Let them be part of the process of coming up with what the rules are. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And lastly, guiding them to solve their own problems. What do you think you should have done? What can you do in the future? What will you do next time? Simple questions. If you look at the behavior journals we use at school, that's exactly what it says. There's only 3 parts to it. Number 1, what did you do? Number 2, why did you do it? Number 3, what could you do next time? That's it. That's the only conversation you need to have. If you cover those 3 bases with them and have that conversation, first of all, you're going to gain insight into what's really going on with your child. Because usually when they're acting out, there's something else. Number 2, you're showing them that you actually care about what they say and their reasons for it. As long as you don't listen to what they say and they go, yeah, but you still broke the rules. No, it's, okay, let's talk about it. And then sometimes you're going to say, unfortunately, I have to give you a consequence. What do you think would be a good consequence for what you did? Now that you've had the conversation and you've talked about what they did, why they did it, what they could do next time, they're in a different mindset. Now they can actually talk about and they can reflect on why they did it and what they could do next time. And as a result, they can set real consequences for themselves. My favorite is when my son will walk up with his phone and he's like, and hands it to me. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm just giving this to you. I haven't even done anything. And he's learned. He knows what he's like, I made a mistake. And he'll just tell me everything. He tells me things before anyone else does. I remember in first grade, one of our learners who's with us now in 8th grade happened to be in class with him then. And they're sitting on the rug in first grade, and he said, and this girl said to my son, I know what the middle finger means. And my son said, what? And so she told him, and he thought this word was the most interesting word in the world. So he started saying it, and the kids around him started laughing. So he started saying it again, and the kids around him started laughing. And the teacher pulled them out one by one, the whole group of kids, and asked them what they said. And many of them said it under their belt, or they'd say, I said the F word, or I said something I'm not supposed to. But calls out my son, and my son says, I said. And she was shocked, and he owned it. Now, I worked at that school. It wouldn't be hard to reach me. After school, by the time she called me, which was only a few minutes after school, he had already come upstairs and told me the whole story himself, and already given himself a consequence. I didn't have to do it. He took it on himself. He was honest with me because he knew I was going to listen to him, and I'm not going to yell and scream at him about that one. We had a conversation about it. He hates the fact that I still tell the story, and he knows I do. But it was different. It was something we could talk about and joke about. And now he teases the other child about it. You're the person who taught me how to swear. It's become kind of a badge of honor in middle school. Guiding them to solve their own problems allows you the flexibility to not have to come up with all those dang consequences, because that's hard to do too. How many times can you give the same consequence with absolutely no results? How many times do we take away devices, take away TV time, cancel play dates? Now we're stuck watching them do absolutely nothing. And when they're doing absolutely nothing, they're going to come and bug us more. It doesn't work. But letting them come up with their own consequences, they're actually going to abide by them. Okay. Next slide. So this brings us to family meetings. We have family meetings in our house every week. We are home around dinner time every week together, but by the time we're all ready to eat, we're exhausted, and most days we're going to end up sitting in front of a TV and eating, and we'll be together, but it's not much. But we made a rule that once a week, and it's Thursday nights at our house, once a week we have a family meeting. So we eat at the dining room table all together, and when dinner's finished, one of the kids goes and grabs our centerpiece for our council, and we sit at the table and we have council. We go through and we talk about what was the best thing you did that happened today? What was something that was difficult today? And we come up with different prompts, and the kids come up with them, we come up with them, we take turns who's in charge of council. But having just that time dedicated to having conversations about how your week has been and what's going on in their lives is huge. And if you start now, it's something that they'll carry with them. And you can start it just abruptly. We did. We only started 2 years ago. And it was their idea, not mine. And we do them every week, and it's great. It's this chance for us to reconnect, to talk with each other. I have given you the rules of council in the packet. That is the hardest part. So one important part of council is really listening. Truly listening to what everyone else says. And the best way to know that you're listening is at the end, we do something called witnessing, where everyone has to repeat something they heard someone else say. And sometimes more than one thing. But truly listening to each other and not interrupting each other, and whoever has that talking piece can talk as long as they want, is difficult. And actually giving them that time and that patience to be there for as long as council takes, no matter how tired we are. That's important. Once you have family meetings regularly, then the really cool part that happens is kids start asking for them. So, again, a personal story. My favorite is my son wanted his ear pierced last year. And some of you know this story. He asked us, and we both said absolutely not. And he then decided not to say anything for a couple weeks. And then he called for a family meeting on a weekend. We all sat down. We opened council. We did roses and thorns. We closed council, and before we could get up, he said, "I have something else." I said, "Okay." Went and grabbed his iPad, and he had a Prezi on the gender inequalities within the Kaufman household. He called a meeting to discuss how we had treated him completely differently than our daughter, and she got her ears pierced when she was 2, and the only reason she got her ears pierced is we told her that if she started using the potty, we'd pierce her ears. And so he didn't understand why at age 2, all she had to do was learn to use the bathroom, and she got something that he at age 12 was making a conscious decision was part of who he was. Needless to say, his ears are pierced now. Only one, and he's considering the other. But it was the way that he was able to come to us and have a conversation without it being, "But I want to," "No," "But I want to," "No," "Why can't I? You're the worst parent." None of that ever happened. We avoided that entire normal scenario of parent says no to something a child wants. He took the time to do the research, to explain why. He also, in his Prezi, had pictures of every single one of our male friends who has their ear pierced, and there are many. And he went through and explained that since we have tattoos, and it's a sign of body modification, then why couldn't he? And he really had all these arguments that he had researched, and he was right. We were making this decision based on a gender bias. He was right. The fact that he was able to win that argument that way made our family meetings that much stronger. Because now they know they can bring things up, and yes, we may still say no, but the fact is that we actually will listen, and we'll listen to their side of it, and they can present what their true opinions are. The family meetings also led to what we have as a family contract. Denise, can you go to the next slide, please? So we have hanging on our refrigerator, anyone who comes over, it is on our refrigerator with all of our signatures, the contract that we wrote as a family. And it says, "We, the members of the Kaufman household, in order to have a happier life and get along, agree to the following." And we have in it our rules. Very basic rules. We talk about respecting each other, not interrupting each other, not raising our voices. Do we meet the contract every single day? Absolutely not. Anyone who's been in our house knows there are days when all of us are yelling, screaming, the whole bit. But the fact is that it's there as what we want to strive for. Again, it's a process, it's a practice, it's not perfection. It's what we are trying to be. We want to meet all the needs of our contract. We can't always. So a couple things that are important. Number one, you want a rule about how to treat each other. These are generalizations. I wouldn't write them this way in a contract. I would write them the way your family speaks. So our rule about treating each other with respect says specifically, when someone says something, we will believe them. Because that's the hardest one in our house. All 4 of us have difficulty with that. That's the first rule. When it talks about being responsible and accountable, we have a rule. We will always tell each other where we are and when we'll be home. Easy rule to have now when I'm driving the kids around. But if that becomes practice now, it changes. I still have that rule with my parents. My parents go out of town, they send me their itinerary, so I know where they're at. I go anywhere, I still tell them. If I am, tomorrow, I'm not gonna be at school, I'm gonna be in Santa Clarita, my mom knows, still. We talk about in case of an emergency, why should we be accountable and why should we tell each other where we're at? It's important to us. Clean up your own mess. So in our household, it's each of us will be responsible for cleaning up our own things and we'll get points for helping each other. So we don't do allowance in our house, we do points. And each point is worth 50 cents. And it's right there next to the contract, little tally marks. And when they help each, and it's not something that is, oh, for every chore you're going to get something. They have chores that they have to do just because they have to do them. They each fold their own laundry, they pack their own lunch, they do their own dishes. That's just expected. But when they go above and beyond and help someone else out or help each other out, we give them points. And they learn to save those up. Morgan just bought a laptop. I paid for half, The other half came from his business and from points. He saved over $200 in points. That's 400 points. That's a lot of good deeds. But he knew what he wanted and he saved up for it. And I was more than happy to reward him for it. The hardest one is do not argue and talk back to your parents in a disrespectful way. Ours actually says do not talk back and talk harmfully to each other. And I think it's important that it's not just about the parents, that we have to follow the exact same rules the kids do. So curfew is not in our family contract because obviously I don't have one. But anything that we're going to hold all four of us to is in our contract. You can revisit the contract at family meetings. We can talk about it. We can point it out. And when we're really following it perfectly, the household works. It's only when we get wrapped up in all our own shit and we're worked up and we can't handle things that it falls apart. And usually what that means is we need a family meeting. Let's regroup. Let's discuss. Let's see where our shortcomings are. And the kids will point it out to us. Mom, you're not following rule number whatever. And I had to go back and look and see what rule it is because I never remember them. And then I go and apologize. You're right. I'm sorry. But the fact that they know they can call me on not following the contract gives them that power to know that this is what we expect from all of us. This is important to us as a family unit. So if you haven't done a family contract, I strongly suggest it be the last step of all of this. You have to have the respect first. You have to do love and logic first. You have to have that positive relationship through family meetings first. You have to have that comfort level with your kids that you're actually going to give them some power. And then when you're ready, you can write a family contract because that is different from a set of house rules. Too often kids think that parents just give them rules for absolutely no reason and parents don't have to follow rules. But once you have a family contract and it's about being decent to each other, then you could talk about limits instead of rules. So that's how we talk about it. Bedtime for my daughter is different than bedtime for my son. And when she asks why, I say because she's older, he has different limits. Not different rules, different limits. We use that word quite often. It changes the way that conversation happens and it makes it much more acceptable because she knows when she's 13, she'll have the same bedtime. If I leave you with anything tonight, the biggest thing I can tell you is just listen to your kids. Be respectful of them. Have them be part of the conversation. Have them be part of how your household runs. And always tell them to talk about it later. Thank you. We want to open up for a little bit of Q&A, and we're doing it a little more fun this year. At our last Parent University, we tried doing it via Twitter, and I realized that our parents are more Luddites than our kids, and most of you don't have Twitter accounts. So instead, what we have tonight is a really cool mic in a box. What's it called? A catch box. It's a mic.
Which works most of the time.
And when you have it, you get to ask questions.
Hello?
And I can't throw, so I'm going to have someone else throw, because I will hit everyone in the head if I try.
It's soft.
Yeah, I'll still hit them.
Okay.
I know myself. So is there someone who has a question who wants to try it first?
It's a baseball game. Oh.
Did it not go on? Oh.
1, 2. Oh, there you
There we
go.
go.
Okay. So I have 2 kids, they same age, boy and a girl, and the only screaming in our house is because when they fight. So, like, if I say, okay, you made a bad choice, we'll talk about it later, it will absolutely do nothing. They will continue fighting, like, until somebody will pull them apart. So how are you dealing with those consequences?
So when they fight, do you have to physically pull them apart? Or do you have to go in yelling and screaming?
Yes, pretty much. Like I have to like take up laptop and like put them like in different rooms, sometimes forcibly, because they will not go.
So what if you walked up to them and instead say, I'm really sad with the decision you've made. Both of you need some time to think about this. and have them go to different parts of the room. Now, they're going to continue fighting, and if you keep repeating yourself and not say anything else, I need you both to go to different parts of the room. I need you both to go to different parts of the room. Without raising your voice, repeat yourself. It's going to take a lot the first couple of times. They'll start noticing that you're not doing anything else. After a while, they let them fight while you're doing it and just keep repeating yourself. They will eventually notice that you're standing there saying the same thing over and over again and will pay attention.
So,
And it will take time.
so no consequence, just like pull them into different parts of the room and like,
We'll talk about it later.
and,
I need you to go to different parts of the room and we'll talk about it later.
okay,
And walk away when they go to the other parts.
okay.
And if they start yelling at each other from across the room, I did this with both my kids, and it would be one would go to one part, and I come back and say, no, you're not talking to each other right now. We're going to talk about this later. We're going to talk about this later. And just keep repeating it. They will start listening. It's hard. I know. It's really hard, especially when they're physical. When my two are hitting each other, that's when it's the hardest for me. But it's just a matter of being a broken record.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else? Okay.
I love this thing.
Okay, so I have two girls, 2 and 9. So they're quite separated in age. They fight over all the toys, mainly the 2-year-old trying to take things away from the 9-year-old. I'm not sure that the 2-year-old would understand that we need to talk about it later, things like that. So how would you handle that?
With the 2-year-old, really, the honest thing is to have the conversation as to why they're taking it away. There's a reason. It's attention seeking. Your 2-year-old wants the attention of your 9-year-old. So this is where you get to, as a parent, make that decision with your 9-year-old and explain, your sister really wants your attention. And I know you're 9 and she's 2, but if you would play with her for half an hour every single day, I would give you the reward of whatever. So now she's getting a reward for it, so she'll want to do it more. And your 2-year-old's getting the attention that she's seeking, and after a while, she'll stop. Because it's attention. It's all about attention. When siblings fight, 9 out of 10 times, it's either for your attention or the other sibling's attention. So you have to look into your house and see which one it is. If it's about you, then it means you need to spend more time being in there playing with them. If it's about the older sibling, then you need to ask the older sibling to do that. I did that with my son, and he hated it for a while. Now they play together all the time. But it was, you need to play with her. But I don't like playing. I understand. But I'd like you to play with him for half an hour. But I don't want to. And for us, it was, you can have 1 point if you play with her for half an hour. At this time, they don't get points for it at all, and they just do it. So it becomes part of their routine. And he knows she pushes him. She's difficult. And he'll come in completely frustrated with her, and then we talk about why she's doing it. And when I have that honest conversation with him about why she's making those choices, his empathy grows, because now he understands where she's coming from as opposed to it being about him. Go back. There you go.
Okay, got it. All right. Hi.
Hi.
I have a bunch of questions, but first of all, what parental controls do you use?
I use Kids Lock.
Kids Lock?
It's my favorite one. It's KIDSLOX. It works on Androids and Apple products, so it works on everything. I can actually decide what apps they have on during what hours. So at school, all their games are disabled.
Okay.
And I can control how many hours of screen time. I can adjust it. It allows me to see every website they've been to. It logs how many minutes they spend on any website or on any app.
Okay.
And they
I'm
know.
sure-
They know
yeah.
I have
Yeah.
control. I also, for a browser, don't let them use Safari or Firefox. I use a browser called Secure Teen, which controls every search that they can do and keywords that they are not allowed to search for. And they know I have access to it.
Okay. Okay, that's question one. I think probably other parents feel this way too, is, we're tired or we're doing something or we're focused on our own thing, and so and we don't have a set thing for them to do, and so they go to their computer, they go on their phone, and it's the culture that is in our house. And I try to say, read a book, or go for a run, or go for a walk the dog. And it's, there's a lot of pushback, and we do talk about how we need limit it, and I know that this tool will help with that, but the whole mindset of you don't have to be entertained, we don't have to have an activity, you do need to, you know what I'm saying, because they don't have
we
the
have the same
homework,
conversation.
they don't have,
And in our household, we don't have an actual time limit. I did originally. You only have an hour of screen time, and I realized that wasn't fair to them, because there are days I want to tune out and watch TV for hours too. So what we talk about is why. So on days when they're feeling that way, we have a conversation, and so they know that there are times when it's okay and there are times when it's not. And so the conversation becomes, why are you exhausted? Are you tired? Are you stressed? What's going on? And each of my kids is different. My daughter could care less about most things. She'll watch YouTube, and that's the extent of it for her. She doesn't watch TV. She doesn't care about anything else. She'll go and play soccer outside.
Yeah.
My son, if you allow him to, he will sit in front of a screen all day long. And it was interesting because we actually had this argument yesterday. He was on the computer again, and I was like, can't you just do something different, something creative? And he got very upset, and he said, Mom, I'm designing houses on the computer. I plan on being an architect when I grow up. I am doing something creative. And when I do this as a job, this is exactly what I'll be doing. And I had to think, well, he's right. I mean, I'm asking him to do something creative. He is doing something creative. So then we talked about, well, what are other things that he could do that are creative? And he's homesick. So I was like, why am I being so hard on him? And I had to stop and think, why is it that right now I need to enforce this rule when other days I don't? And so it's having that conversation and talking about when it's okay and when it's not, and having limits, saying when you come home from school that day, say, you guys are feeling well, you don't have any schoolwork to do, there's no need for technology, today we're going to limit it to 1 hour because there's no need for it. And by having that conversation where they understand that there's a reason today we're limiting it and that they're to do other things, it changes it.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's
very
hard because
the other rule we have in our household is technology is not allowed in their bedrooms.
That's a really hard one to enforce.
I've enforced it the entire
especially-
time. No phones,
It's
no
not?
devices in their rooms at all. Zero.
Yeah. It's hard because they do homework and things like that.
In the living room.
Yeah.
They wear earbuds, headphones in the living room if you have to listen to something. I do not allow laptops, iPads, phones in their rooms at all. Zero. Zoe has figured out she can sit in the hallway, and that works for her. But at least it's in the hallway, and I can see right down and see what she's doing. But yeah, that's been our rule from the get-go.
Yeah,
And that
that's
changes
been a
it too,
rule,
because
but
then I
not
can monitor what they're doing. I'm a difficult mom.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, my daughter, the first thing she does when she gets in the car, she's on, she opens up the Musical.ly. I'm sure everyone talks about how
Yeah.
Musical.ly has just been, it's adorable and creative, but it's a big
I also limit things like that. I limit
Yeah.
social media completely. So I only allow a certain amount of it. And so if they're going to use a device, they're going to use it for something different.
Okay. And so you can do a lot of this limiting on
It's
the
all
kids' locks.
controlled.
Okay. All right, and then the last question is the growth mindset. I think that that's a great thing. That's part of the reason we're all, I'm here at this school. I think my daughter thinks she has this idea she's not good at math or she's great at language arts, and so we try to give her the tools to then learn to be more comfortable and excel. But kind of sending the message that you might have to work a little bit harder to cross that bridge to then feel, do you know what I'm
That's still a
saying?
fixed mindset, because you're
Yeah.
telling her she has to work harder on something instead
Yeah.
of you're doing what you can do.
Or that, you might be doing something that's a little uncomfortable, that you're not exactly, the other one's really easy.
Getting
So
them out of their
stretching.
comfort zone is huge. I
Right.
always talk
I think that's what I'm
to
talking about.
adults and kids about we learn most when we're not in our comfort zone. So when we're in our comfort zone, it's everything we know and we're here. And when we're completely out of our comfort zone, we start to panic. But if we're right on the periphery, where it's uncomfortable and it's difficult, but we can still jump back into safety, that's a big part of it. Have kids take risks with other things so they have that analogy. It's one of the reasons at iLead we do things like last year we did ropes courses. We took all the staff, 300 staff members from all the iLead schools on ropes courses. That was really difficult for some people. This year we did, what was it called? The mystery thing? Escape, yeah, we did an escape room. And then we did ice sculptures. I'm not kidding you. They put a block of ice in front of us in teams of 5, handed us tools, and we built and we actually made sculptures.
Wow.
Super out of our comfort zone for a lot of us. And so when you give them experiences that are out of their comfort zone, and you actually take them on those little mini adventures and do things like that, then you can draw that analogy. You could say, you remember when we did X, Y, and Z, and it was hard, and you'd never done it before, but you tried, and you had fun? You weren't really good at it at the end, but you had fun with it? That's exactly how I want you to look at math. It might not be what you think you're good at, but it doesn't matter if you're good at it or not. I just want you to try and have fun with it. So the emphasis is not about mastery, and it's not about what you're good at. It's more about having fun with it and being a part of it, and knowing that you're on a continuum and you're just moving forward.
So I just wanted to ask you, I have a pair of twins, 10 years old and a 6-year-old.
Yep.
And how you foster empathy, because they have at their previous school, they have a program where they have a little buddy, and they can be very nice to their little buddy, but with their sister, I cannot make them understand that she's younger, she's less strong, like it's just like...
I think what's changed empathy in our household is really counsel. One of the things I think it's changed our entire school is that idea of, counsel is this idea of you're telling stories. That sounded like a bad accident. It's this idea of you're telling stories about your personal experience, and everyone's story is valid. And if you start that practice in the home, I would start with something simple, where in a family meeting, you're going to pass around a rock, and whoever has the rock does roses and thorns is the easiest. Roses are positives, thorns are negatives of the day, and the roses must always outweigh the thorns. So if you have 3 thorns, you must have at least 4 roses. And if they go through that practice of talking about their own experiences and hearing the stories, they start listening to each other, it will change and it'll grow. Empathy is not something that you could just tell someone to do. It's not something that everyone is born with. I can tell you it's one of my biggest weaknesses. And I had to learn how to listen with my heart and how to actually internalize their stories and make my own associations with it. And so that's what I would do. I would definitely foster having meetings where the kids are talking about their feelings and talking about situations and listening to each other about it. It will happen eventually. It will take time. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. When I send out the survey, each of these points is one of the parent universities that we can do, and I've done most of them already in the past, and I'd be happy to host again. And thank you all for coming.